So just a quick introduction. So the paper is written by 4 researchers, Lemnis Cap and Economics Design. The researchers are Luca, Dan, Daniele, Jean-Marco. We have Lemnis Cap of VC as well as Economics Design, which Kiefer and I are part of. Today, we also have a guest star, Michael from Star Atlas. Michael, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi there, everyone. Thanks for the invite to the Twitter Spaces. I'm Michael Wagner. I'm co-founder and CEO of Star Atlas.
Thank you for joining. Thank you very much for making your time and chat with us. So, what are we talking about today? To get started and to give a quick recap of what we've discussed last week, why did we write the paper and what did we talk about? Why did we write the paper? We wrote the paper because we want to help developers and investors understand what this space is about. P2E is quite complicated. When you talk about games, aesthetics design and game design, gameplay design is already really complicated. Building all the economics behind all these gameplay is very difficult. And Star Atlas is one of the projects that we analyze, and hence really glad for Michael to be joining us and chatting about it. So the reason why we create this is because there is no one-size-fits-all model for play-to-earn games. So we built a framework in which these are different components and parameters that should be considered when you're designing your own play-to-earn game. We analyzed 12 different protocols looking at different kind of complex games, different kind of game strategies and mechanisms. And last week, or the last time we chat, we talked about the first segment, which are the 5 personas you have to consider when designing your game. Because a game is a live economy, it's a live ecosystem, you have different economic agents in there. You have to understand who are they, and we have to think about them when we're designing the other parameters which will affect these personas. So that being said, we can get started with the first part on what do we have to consider in market design. And I'll let Daniele chat a little bit more about this. Daniele.
Hi, everybody. When talking about market design in our framework, we consider 3 main parts. The first one being user-generated content. So with the leveraging of blockchain technology, an immense amount of opportunities opened up, especially the opportunity to let people be stakeholders in the games they play. So they can generate the content and allow everybody to use it. But when doing this, a problem emerges. How do you incentivize somebody to do that? So in the traditional economy, how you do that is by creating patents, which are temporary rights to have a monopoly. But if we were to do this with just NFTs, the asset could be copied and the creative effort wouldn't be rewarded. So we looked at UCG and we divided it into open, closed, and no UCG, and then discussed a bit on the possibilities to incentivize open UCG. Speaking about NFTs, we looked at how they leveraged and stored the metadata. So either IPFS, so distributed storage, some centralized servers, or the cloud, and what technical solution might be the best to use the NFT and allow for the secondary exchange of the assets. Then, looking at value, we looked at how the value comes into the ecosystem and how the protocol designers must change the value distribution, the value sinks, and how they can incentivize the value creation by, as I said, redistributing value through currencies, inflationary policies, tokenomics, and so on. And then I will let the floor to Kiefer to speak about mechanism designs.
Before we go there, just a quick recap. So when we talk about market design, these are the different components defining the market. A market is where anyone comes in to transact and trade and interact with someone else. So here we look at 3 things: UGC, NFTs, as well as how value is being created when users come together. So with that in mind, Michael, could you share a little bit more about how does Star Atlas work with UGC, NFTs, as well as value creation and value distribution in Star Atlas?
Sure. Yeah, I'd be happy to. I mean, I guess as a starting point, I would note that we have an evolving kind of roadmap for things like user-generated content. And it's very important for us at this early stage, given the ambitious vision that we've laid out, that we really maintain and uphold the highest levels of standards on graphical fidelity and quality of assets that get introduced while maintaining consistency and uniformity across those assets that are released. So in the near term, and this is probably a couple of years, we are not enabling the inclusion or integration of any external user-generated content across Star Atlas. There will be a future through decentralization and through the Star Atlas DAO wherein this becomes enabled. But our primary concern at this stage is ensuring that we don't deliver, to use a bit of a negative term, a Frankenstein of a universe. We want to ensure that we're able to fulfill and deliver our full vision that we've outlined, our white papers, and across all of the communications that we've relayed out there to the community, before enabling that type of access. I do see enormous potential. I guess I would caveat that and just say we do see enormous potential in the concept of UGC specifically for Metaverse and what we would consider to be non-gaming DACs. Now, in the Star Atlas nomenclature, guilds we refer to as decentralized autonomous corporations. And we think in terms of you have gaming DACs that are going to be participating specifically in all of the gameplay loops and experiences that we deliver. Gaming being the primary application on Star Atlas at inception, and the application that we're focused on building extensively in the early years. In the future, though, this idea of the metaverse, wherein things like social experience and human interaction, digital work, academics, and things like e-commerce, right? These will all exist as well. And we think those will be the experiences that these external entrepreneurs and innovators will create in the future and build and bring into Star Atlas. So we do believe in a future wherein we're building the tools necessary to enable this type of activity from innovators all over the world. And so in terms of content right now, it is pretty exclusive. Our marketplace is dedicated to all of those Star Atlas assets that we've been building. NFT asset classes that we'll be creating include things like ships, components, crew members, buildings, structures, land, essentially any observable asset inside the Star Atlas universe is going to be an NFT that can be owned by a player or a group or collective of players. What was really critical for us is we really try to embody the ideology of decentralization, open source technology, and inclusion. And as a component of that, we built our entire marketplace on Web3 protocols. So the method in which we deliver content and execute on sales today, that was all built on Serum decentralized exchange code. So you're already transacting exclusively on chain anytime you purchase an asset from us, or in the future. And even today, users are able to take assets that they own and sell them on a peer-to-peer basis, again, directly through Serum Dex, which is the core integration into our marketplace.
Thank you, Michael. So before I add on to that, I think Simran, you have some questions. Would you like to speak up right now?
Yeah, I do have a few questions, but maybe you should finish your point first because I might change the topic.
Oh, okay, sure, no worries. So when it comes to market design, designing the market, designing the parameters of how the market is created, it's not to say that you should be fully open UGC, closed UGC, or no UGC at all. It really depends on what you're looking to build. So for example, in Star Atlas case, there's a very targeted output, very targeted roadmap to follow, and a semi UGC is relevant, where the creators or the developers are the one creating all the UGC. Whereas for another kind of game, like say Sandbox, where it's basically Minecraft kind of model, and you need a lot of UGC, and so it's really open. What we're trying to share is that these are different parameters that you can customize and you can design based on your game. So in Star Atlas case, it's quite of a closed loop UGC for now. Great. And we're going to move on to mechanism design in all the different aspects. Simran, is your question regarding that aspect or something else? But now I'll pass the floor to Kiefer to talk a little bit more about mechanism design, which are rules of the game.
Thanks, Lisa. So in examining mechanism design, there are a lot of different components, but the three primary ones that I want to touch on are looking at the revenue model that any particular game chooses to employ, their general business model, and how governance gets integrated into the system. So I'll give an overview of each of these, and then for each of the categories, have a question for Michael, and seeing how Star Atlas is pursuing each of these different components. So starting off looking at the revenue model, there are a variety of ways that games could choose to allocate revenue to the NFT asset owners. And the ideal method is really going to depend on which types of users and which types of activities that you're trying to provide incentives for. So one option is providing direct revenue directly to the NFT asset holders. So providing revenue regardless of them actually doing anything with the NFT. And this incentivizes passive investors, but not so much of actually using that NFT. Other directions you can go are incentivizing that asset usage. So as a simple, players are using that asset, but sometimes you want to kind of combine and incentivize the usage of that asset while providing a way for investors to get some revenue off of those NFT assets they're buying. And from that, you could have a rental system, or you could also have a scholarship system, like we're seeing with Axie. And something kind of interesting I see with Star Atlas and scholarship is that it's kind of has the potential to create a better scholarship economy, where you get something closer to real employment, with users having a variety of different activities they can do based on specialized skill sets. So question for you, Michael, how do you think that an employment or scholarship model would look like in Star Atlas relative to kind of the simpler version we currently see in Axie Infinity, as you have a wide variety of potential employment options?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I've made comments in the past just surrounding the potential for kind of total GDP, and also for the potential for these enormous labor markets to form within the metaverse itself. Now, once again, I would comment that we have a gamer-centric approach first, and so you can think in terms of the different roles and career paths that people can take within Star Atlas, whether that's, being a data runner where you're flying around space and you're discovering new territories, or you're actively engaged in fighting, or maybe you're policing areas of space with a fighter ship, and serving as a security for maybe a freighter who's trying to move materials from one coordinate to another across the universe. Those can all naturally be managed by individual players, or they can be managed by a collective of players on a single ship as well. With land operations, you'll have people that are operating as miners, that are operating as logistics coordinators. You'll have CEOs of companies, which are effectively, in many cases, going to be these guild or DAC leaders. Those are just some of the career paths that people can take participating in Star Atlas gameplay. The metaverse component of itself could also translate to somebody becoming an employee in an e-commerce storefront that exists inside the metaverse, wherein real world products are being sold. Right. We've seen Nike move into Sandbox. We're seeing major brands move into Metaverse in general. And it's very likely that there will need to be employees that are serving in positions in these digital storefronts necessary to help facilitate some sales. Maybe not required, but there could be a benefit there in increasing sales. So all of those are roles that individuals can play. While we're not necessarily focused on, say, the scholarship model, because our intention across Star Atlas is to ensure that asset pricing remains reasonable and inclusive. So regardless of an individual's financial position, they can still access the game. And we do that with a wide range of pricing of assets, starting anywhere from, say, $15, going all the way up to the hundreds of thousands to potentially millions of dollars range. The idea, though, is that over time, players across Star Atlas at least have an immediate low-friction entry point to get into the game. They can start to accrue wealth and compound wealth, and then continuously upgrade and improve equipment and assets that they own, and provide greater earnings potential for them going into the future. So we're not necessarily looking at the scholarship model, but I do see enormous potential for people that are looking for, say, passive income. And while that's not a mechanic that we're directly enabling, the ability to lend is where I see this emerging, right? So call it venture capital, institutional capital, any large individual buyer of these assets, building portfolios of game assets that they don't intend to utilize. Right, we're focused on gamer action-driven income. Somebody's going to have to operate that equipment, but if it's not the person that owns it, there should be a facility that is executed through Web3, through some lending protocol, wherein someone can borrow that, gain access, and then it's a split in revenue. And that can all be negotiated directly through whatever this lending platform that ultimately gets integrated, whatever that is.
That covered it excellently, Michael. Thank you. Yeah, that it's going to be very interesting to see how that develops in terms of having a massive economy where users actually have an ability to be fully employed entirely within the metaverse and have a really wide variety of opportunities there. And so connecting a bit to what you said there.
Kiefer, can I make, actually, sorry, just one more comment I just want to touch on, because it is something that comes up in conversations or has in the past. And it's this idea of, are we going to create this exploitative labor force inside the metaverse, right? People that aren't able to purchase assets and then just become this perpetual labor force for the wealthy. The reason why I don't think that will be the case, especially across Star Atlas, is that there's going to be a lot of efficiency across these labor markets. Labor will be, capital will be competing with capital in a very transparent fashion. You're essentially going to have a global job board, and people will be able to understand quite well what are the compensation levels for a given career path inside the metaverse, and they'll see that, and they'll be able to compare that against other people around the world, right? So whereas right now there's asymmetry to information, and also there's these geographic boundaries on where people work and operate, and as such they can actually be exploited, right? Depending on where you live, you can be exploited because you don't have opportunity. Within the metaverse, there is no boundary. You can work for anyone, and anybody can create a competitive wage for someone else, and the people that are paying competitive wages for various activities will be the ones to identify, locate, and secure the best talent across the metaverse as well.
Yeah, that's a very good point, because I think when in the near future, it's not about competing just gig workers versus full-time jobs, but also on-chain versus off-chain worlds. And what we're really doing is using technology to enable more opportunities for different people to play around with. But let's move on to token design on monetary policy first. So when we talk about, the last pillar in this entire framework is token design, which is monetary policy, how we design the tokens. And in token design, we really want to, in monetary policy, more specifically, we're trying to balance between inflationary and deflationary pressures. And we did a little case study on Axie Infinity. So Luca, can you run through with us, what does that look like how do we balance between the assets created, which is Axies in the space, and how does it affect the internal currency? Let's talk a little bit about that, and then we can look at the comparison with Star Atlas.
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. And I apologize in advance in case my connection gets cut. But as Lisa mentioned, we looked at, I think we all look at this slices of metaverse as very interesting macroeconomic exercises, right? When we simplify how the macroeconomic state model works, and we are trying to create levers that improve the engagement of all the agents and try to make a better, more equitable space for everybody to engage and provide services, being time, being resources, or anything else. And I mean, the Axie Infinity case for us was very interesting. First of all, because it was the first play to earn platform that actually got a macroeconomic level of engagement. And then because they were also thinking about it that way, we followed them through the second part of this year. And in the way they were using their two levers, their two tokens, the AXS token and the SLP token that was an internal currency. And it was interesting for us because we were seeing a tentative effort by Skymavic to grow the ecosystem, i.e., just growing the people and the resources pool within, and meaning also the monetary policy, but without creating an explosive inflation of their internal currency token. Because obviously, in the same way we could look at these metaverses as emerging economies. Like if you're growing and you're pulling a lot of resources, then your internal currency may appreciate and may actually decrease the ability for more people to come in, or actually decrease impact an effective allocation of resources within. And we're seeing this because obviously in crypto everything is so quick and fast that things can move and can create self-destructive cycles very easily, and this could be threatening for the ecosystem as a whole. So I would be very curious to hear from you how you think about this in Star Atlas, and how you're trying to play with an expansionary levers of the economy or the ecosystem, and instead restrictive ones, then try to modulate the growth in a sustainable way to make this ecosystem survive in the long term.
So more specifically for you, Michael, so we take a step back to look at what are the various factors that affects the demand of the native token as well as the demand of the NFTs, and what are the parameters that you have embedded in your system that allows us to change these different what are the levels in the...
Well, there are many levers that we can pull. I will say this is one of the more sophisticated aspects of what we're building in Star Atlas. From a top-level core objective design of Star Atlas ecosystem, our first priority is, one of the reasons why we selected Unreal Engine to build this hyper-realistic cinematic quality world is that it will enable us to build a very entertaining, engaging, and immersive experience for the gamer, right? So that's priority number one, and what we're hyper-focused on in the initial years. The second component of this, though, and the cornerstone of what we're doing, is deep economic analysis, creating a circular and robust and sustainable economy in the long term. And so one of the major pitfalls of things like play-to-earn gaming is this like purely extractive economy wherein there's a subsidy in place, there's a inflation created through the distribution of tokens that facilitates the play to earn, but there's no further utilization of the token. So if you're creating an ecosystem where cash or value consistently flows out, that simply isn't sustainable, right? So that's one of the things that we're very focused on, is how do we retain value inside Star Atlas? Our economics department consists of the hierarchical organizational design is a chief economist. And the chief economist's role is to look at broad macroeconomic variables in a framework that that sovereign states would typically analyze this. So thinking in terms of countries, right? I would draw a distinction here between decentralized open metaverse platforms, such as the one that we're building, and more closed permission-based systems. Let's just use Meta as an example, and I will caveat and say I think Mark Zuckerberg did a really fantastic job in outlining the potential of types of experiences that can exist in the metaverse. Just ideologically, we couldn't be in more contrast. So our chief economist is thinking in terms of exactly like you said, monetary policy, fiscal policy, and general economic policy. Beneath that, we have a head of game economy. That's going to focus on internal game balance and financial incentives across gameplay loops. We have a head of token economy, and this is where you start to kind of cross the border, the line, wherein distribution of tokens that live inside Star Atlas have the immediate ability to transcend that gaming environment or that virtual world into the real world, which is the alternative financial ecosystem we all operate in across cryptocurrency. So when you have this flow of value, this exchange, you need to think of that essentially as the same as foreign exchange across countries. So do you want to retain your national domestic currency? In many cases, and in a lot of developing nations, they don't, right? Because these are hyperinflationary environments where their purchasing power is consistently devalued. So people in Venezuela, for example, are looking towards crypto like Bitcoin or trying to get into the US dollar because at least then it retains purchasing power over time. What we need to create across Star Atlas is motivation and incentive structures wherein people actually want to retain and hold their Atlas because there's utility for it, and because purchasing power is not only maintained but has the potential to increase over time as well. The third department is our head of monetization, which is really just looking at creative new revenue models and opportunities that can, in many ways, drive value back into the ecosystem overall. I would also just comment in thinking of terms of utility and token mechanics. There's a lot of different things that we can do. We do have a dual token system. Star Atlas or Atlas token is our medium of exchange. It's a transactional currency. It's the primary financial incentive structure. But one of the immediate steps that we take is not having inflation being unidirectional. In fact, operating across Star Atlas requires players to consistently reinvest back into themselves through the purchase of various resources to maintain their assets, to continue producing income. So almost all activities in the gameplay loop are treated as kind of individual businesses of sorts with their own operating costs and expenses. That creates an interesting dynamic for our alternative token, Polis, which is the Star Atlas DAO. I think many people on the call probably understand what decentralized autonomous organizations are, but generally speaking, these are governance structures that gives rights to those governors to be able to direct things like development and design and feature requests, the future evolution of Star Atlas in our case. But they also have kind of a financial incentive to participate in that governance because they earn emissions in Polis. And in our case, we segregate revenues that are generated through all of those operating costs within the economy inside the metaverse. Those get recaptured and distributed out to DAO members, or rather, the DAO has rights to treasury management of those assets. Now, it could be distributed out directly to holders. They could be burned. They could be utilized to pay ourselves, or maybe in the future, some alternative studio to build out a specific feature, or alternatively, they could even be invested into the community to continue growth of user base, attracting new people into the economy, which further compounds growth of GDP, and then subsequently, further increases the notional value of income that flows into the DAO. To the extent that the economy continues growing, greater value accrues to the DAO. Circling back to Atlas, not only do we have these gameplay loops where you need to reinvest some of your earnings back into your character and into your assets so you can continue playing, but then we supplement that with things like token mechanics, which includes staking contracts, right, with various incentives. And I won't get too deep into this because it's a feature that we're rolling out in Q1 with our new marketplace program, but effectively providing various benefits to holding your tokens, which is effectively the same as retaining it in, say, your national domestic currency, as opposed to exchanging it into something else that you think will retain value in a more stable format. One final point on. Sorry, I kind of lost my train of thought there, but I think I largely covered your question. Ultimately, the idea is that there needs to be growth in utility and also value in holding these assets, so that players are not motivated and inspired to, say, liquidate, but rather reinvest back into themselves for the continuous growth. I think the last thing is really just thinking about our potential for global adoption across Star Atlas. We're not thinking in the hundreds of thousands or millions of users as our demographic. There are many cohorts that will exist across our ecosystem that include the gaming audience, but there's also a major cohort that is that individual that is looking for specifically for play to earn mechanics, and we're seeing that largely. That's derived largely from emerging markets and developing countries, wherein the opportunities present inside virtual worlds is substantially higher than that in working a job in the local economy. And so therefore, these become new participants that want to be actively engaged in our economy and continuously grow. We think Star Atlas, we think the metaverse itself is going to grow to billions of users. And I believe that the economic potential in an environment like ours will exceed the trillions of dollars per year basis over time. And I'm thinking very long-term timelines here, 10 to 20 years. But, when you have a global economy inside a virtual world, it's natural to assume that that's going to exceed any individual GDP of any country. And so we're looking at collective economy around the world with billions of users.
I have a question here, and I think is might be like a very philosophical question, but I'm curious to hear your view. I think and I think you would agree with me that metaverse experiences are, at least in theory, they try to be good resource allocators, right? Resources being financial resources, being time, being effort, being expertise in some way, and probably better resource allocators that because they're gamified, because they're more engaging, because they offer a better experience than other stuff there is out there. So would you expect Star Atlas to compete head to head, doing exactly the same stuff but with a different twist compared to other play to earn / metaverse experiences, or do you think there's going to be some sort of specialization across the board where different solutions offer? Different experiences offer a better solution for certain problems. Or do you think it's going to be like an horizontal head-to-head competition on who grows to up to critical mass first?
If I interpret the question correctly, I do believe in a multiverse model for the immediate future. Again, different gaming environments are going to offer different experiences that are attractive to people for a variety of reasons. The people that are focused most specifically on income levels via play to earn will probably accrue to whichever gaming ecosystem or play to earn ecosystem delivers the best value back to them. Longer term, going into the future, I believe there's going to be a convergence of a lot of these ideas and concepts that have been determined to be most effective. So again, I don't know what that timeline looks like. We try to think in probably like 20, 50, 100-year cycles on what this is going to be. And the reason I say that is, unlike many traditional games, the potential for Star Atlas is to be this perpetually evolving product going into the future. Whether we as a studio are behind that or not at some point is not really relevant because the economic incentive mechanism is there from the foundation. It is a cornerstone of what we're building, and it's facilitated through the DAO. So once the DAO has this ability to capture revenue in perpetuity through the economy, it can decide how to invest that capital, which could be paying another studio or another developer or another content creator or another entrepreneur to come in and build something and build upon what we started with Star Atlas. And so as a result of that, I believe this is something that could live on essentially forever. That's what we're trying to accomplish here. That's the bigger vision. You create a new economy and a new ecosystem that is self-sustained.
Great. Thanks for sharing. And I think you talk a lot about the various mechanisms and how do we create this self-sustaining ecosystem. And I think Kiefer can continue on with his questions because we'll dive into these kind of incentive mechanisms.
Yeah. So one aspect that's important to look at when at the very early stage of figuring out where a game is going to go when they're exploring the P2E side is, as soon as you have money introduced in the ecosystem, what is the best way to have that be impacting the economy? Do you want to have a free-to-play game, a pay-to-play game? And the direction that goes is going to influence the way that users at different bankrolls are interacting with each other. And because kind of the difference from traditional gaming to this play-to-earn space is that now there's the potential to earn real value from gameplay, but how do you keep users at all different levels and financial situations able to be able to have a role in the space and engage with it well? So kind of the issue that brings up in some cases is some games being perceived as pay to win. And this can vary in importance depending on if a game is PvP versus PvE. Because in PvP situations, if one user is able to gain a significant advantage through having more money, it may negatively impact the experience of the lower bankroll player. And I think Star Atlas is an interesting case because it's a very detailed and in-depth economy with a variety of PvP and PvE experiences. And you mentioned earlier that you would have essentially opportunities at different price levels. But what is your general strategy in terms of managing the kind of pay to win idea and ensuring that this is going to be attractive to all these users when managing that aspect?
Might have gotten cut off there. I didn't catch the tail.
I think
Yeah.
how does this continue to be attractive to all the different kind of users in the space? How do you balance the incentives?
Yeah, I guess let me describe a little bit of the shape of the universe inside Star Atlas. So we have a 3-faction system that consists of Mud, Oni, and Ooster. These are essentially human race, aliens, and sentient android beings. This kind of triangle. So, we essentially have this triangular model that creates kind of a rock, paper, scissors. So there's always an advantageous and disadvantageous attribute or characteristic of one of the roles that you're playing. Secondary to that is the concept of security zones throughout the universe, and everybody lands in a neutral zone, a safe space where they can learn how to navigate and play the game. The economic incentives in that zone are the lowest, naturally, because it's also a no risk zone. Exploring out a little bit for the adventurous, they can enter into a medium risk security space. There is PvP engagement in this space, although it's somewhat low consequence. A ship can be destroyed, but respawning will exist, and there's no character death in that zone. Economic incentives increase in this area. And then we are introducing a bit of a hardcore mode. Well, not a bit of, it is a hardcore mode into Star Atlas, wherein as you explore deep space, high risk zone, there is permanent death and NFT destruction. The way we facilitate this, or at least conceptually, as it's not done yet, is through smart contracts, wherein player assets are deposited to this escrow smart contract. And depending on the outcome of an engagement in that space, say you lose an engagement, your ship NFT is actually destroyed. And the winner of that engagement gets to recapture through salvage some of the components and maybe an ejected crew member, maybe a salvaged hull that they can rebuild as an NFT. And in addition to that kind of that PvP dynamic, all of the rarest materials and minerals and items of highest value, end game, if you will exist out there in deep space. Now, there's a variety of methods players can use to combat, say, the distribution of wealth between the player base. One, so we're creating this grand strategy game where there is a top-down view where you can navigate and control entire fleets of ships. But it does go all the way down to ground level, wherein you can actually be in first person view, operating as the captain, operating as a pilot, operating as a gunner or an engineer, or again, any of the career paths. Individual players can actually populate a ship. And what's important for us is to be able to create some advantages and balance between operating a ship with a crew of real people versus operating a fleet of ships with crew members that consist of NPCs or AI. That's one thing, is being able to create that balance. The second thing is forming collectives of players. Sure, an individual player might not have the same capital base as some other individual player, but collectively through guild formation, through DAX, these collectives of players are able then to compete on a broader scale and compete out in deep space. Beyond that, the universe is going to be expansive. It's going to be large, and there will be uniformity in the types of experiences, say things like missions or quests inside Star Atlas, that exist across all of those different security zones and across all of the different factions. So everybody should be able to find a path for themselves where they're both having fun and have the ability to generate income. However, I think it's natural that a player with a larger asset base is able to generate a proportionally higher amount of income for themselves, just given the capital outlay that was required to get access to that. So we don't necessarily think of it as pay to win in Star Atlas. We think there's going to be a certain degree of strategy and structure in player collectives that will enable them to compete at a higher level.
Thanks, Michael. That was very in-depth answer there, and it does do a good job of matching or adding realism to it. You're able to invest more and earn a greater return from it by creating some larger or having a greater impact on the economy. And that does, it adds realism, and it does have advantages for the larger bankroll players, but I think you've have the opportunity to have a really good balance by having specific ways that even smaller individuals can find their space and make their own mark on the game.
Yeah, well said. And I guess I would just point out that because I didn't mention it, but one of the positive consequences of having this concept of ship destruction is that it first and foremost, that creates a deflationary mechanism, whereas existing ships that exist across the economy do get destroyed over time. And we part of our mining and crafting gameplay loop is to enable players to mint or produce through construction their own NFTs based on blueprints. So we fully enable the ability to satisfy demand through player creation of supply over time. But that also creates this no certain dynamic of what assets are going to be in high demand and what is the availability or scarcity of any of these assets over time, because it depends on the outcome of game actions itself. The second thing that also enables is then another Web3 integration point through things like decentralized insurance, where it's very, very like you insure your vehicle that you drive in physical reality because it's of high value and you don't want to lose it and not have the ability to replace it. Well, it's very likely that people will be insuring their ships in Star Atlas such that they can purchase a replacement, even though the item won't be recreated by us or by the insurance provider. The value can be delivered back to the person purchasing insurance, which can then go back into the economy to purchase another one of these items.
Awesome. So yeah, these are different ways in the future where more activities and transactions can be created to increase more interactions between users, hence increasing the value that can be provided by Star Atlas to the community. Well, thank you, Michael, for your time. Thank you for sharing everything. Just to recap what we have talked about today, we talked about how do we define the various parameters to design this robust economy. You got to start somewhere, and it's divided into 3 areas. The first one is market design, defining the parameters and constraints of your market. The second is mechanism design, the rules that allow interaction and the rules that's embedded as economic policies or fiscal policies in your game. And lastly, it's token design, which is the monetary policies of the token itself. It could be NFT, it could be your native tokens. With that, we have looked at the various breakdowns of what is in these different pillars and how Star Atlas has tapped into all these different aspects and how they've designed a very robust system. So thank you everyone for joining. Thank you, Michael, for joining. Do you have any last words you want to part us with?
No, I really enjoyed the discussion today. Thanks for having me here on the Twitter Spaces. And what I would just communicate in closing is we have an incredibly supportive community across Star Atlas. If you're not already a member, we'd welcome you to join us on Twitter and Telegram, or where some of the most engaging conversation happens is in Discord, and that's just discord.gg/Star Atlas. So would love to welcome you into the community. There's a lot of very helpful members who can help bring you up to speed on everything that's taken place over the last year and what's coming up. And we do also host regular, we call them town halls, but these are kind of periodic updates every 2 weeks in Discord as well, where we give you an update on our progression of development. So really appreciative of the community that we have now, and would love to welcome some new people to it.
Thank you, Michael. And for everyone else who's staying, for the report, you can go to econteric.com/P2E. That's econteric.com/P2E. Well, thank you, everyone. We have reached our time, and we'll speak again next week where we have the next session. Goodbye.
Thanks so much. Bye.
Thank you so much for staying throughout this entire video. If you're interested to learn more and you want to join the community, do check out our Discord, check out our Academy, and you get to watch these videos for free as well, without any ads. And also grab the book that I've talked about earlier on. The book summarizes a lot of what we're trying to build, what we're trying to design, and the different aspects that can be changed during the entire design process. We also just launched Econteric. Econteric is really economics plus esoteric, because this space is so complicated and so difficult. What we want to do is to make it easier for anyone to come and learn and be part of this system. So in Econteric, we are breaking down the different analytics and different data to give you more insights to understand the robustness from a very fundamental level of the health of this ecosystem. So check out econtaric.com and I'll see you there. Bye!